Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We welcome you all to our December 2nd Forest Health Council Legislative Committee meeting. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to call this meeting to order and take a roll call to see if we've reached quorum.
Okay, I'll start with roll. Samantha Albert.
Here. Thanks all.
Christy Belton.
Here.
Christina Bury. Pat Dorsey.
Here.
Paige Lewis.
Paige is not here. She asked if I could join to listen in, but I don't think I count as a participant. So thanks for letting me join.
Director Matt McCombs.
Present.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Here.
Mark Morgan. I see Mark.
Here.
Yeah, Julie Stencil.
Good morning, Julie's here.
Ben Tisdale. Sylvan White Skunk. And Commissioner Hillary Cooper. So we do have quorum,
Awesome.
Jody.
Great. Well, let's move on to our first agenda item. Yeah, Samantha, I have slow internet today too, so let me know if you can't hear me all. I kind of did a little rigging up with multiple, as you can see, I'm on twice. So if you can't hear me, I'm going to use my phone. So let's move on. Anybody have any issues or any changes, corrections to the minutes? Okay, with that, without seeing any feedback, then I'll welcome a motion to approve the minutes from November 4th, right? Is that the date, November 4th?
I move to approve the minutes from our November 4th meeting. I'll second.
Any further discussion? Great. Well, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written on November 4th of 2022, please raise your hand or say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. We're off to a rolling start. Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you all for being here today. So we'll move on to the next item, which is our third agenda item, update and answers from the Division of Fire Prevention and Control regarding questions about the wildfire package budget questions. And Courtney or Angela, who's going to answer those?
I'm happy to answer those questions. We sent all of the questions that you all asked in the meeting in early November to Vaughn Jones, and he provided some really good insights. So I'll read a few things from him and then just sort of give an overview of what that item in the governor's budget is for. So all of that funding is actually going to be staying in the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. It's not going to be distributed to local fire departments or divisions via grants or any other methods. The Division of Fire Prevention and Control will be conducting trainings that are going to be available to all of the local fire departments and divisions, both wildland and urban fires. And then the sheriff's offices are also going to be eligible for this funding. And the goal is really to increase the amount of training for these individuals across the state. He clarified that there would not be any funding for equipment or PPE in this proposal, but that DFPC does have 2 other grants that fund these types of resources for local fire divisions and departments. They have the Firefighter Safety and Disease Prevention Grant and the Volunteer Fire Assistance Grant. And so I believe those are already running. And so I could probably try to send some information to people who are interested in those sorts of resources. But yeah, this new item is really just for training that's being administered by the state.
I would be interested in those other grants since we're trying to move our emergency services from the sheriff's department that respond to our wildfires. We're trying to get them out of the floodplain along the Poudre River, and they've way outgrown their location. So we're looking, and we train all the volunteer firefighters too with that. So that'd be great to learn about that. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I can get some more information about those and maybe just share them via email with the committee. Does anyone else have any other questions about the training item in the governor's budget proposal? Okay, well, if anything comes up, I'm happy to pass your questions along to DFPC.
And was that the only quick question, or I thought there was two, but.
So there was the question about who was eligible, if it would be volunteer fire departments and paid fire departments and the sheriff's offices. And the answer is yes, those are all going to be eligible for the training. There was also the question about PPE, boots, trucks, things like that being funded with this, and those will not be funded. This is only for training. And then let me pull up our questions actually. There was a question about if this would be administered via grant, and the answer is no. I know that, let's see, Commissioner Hillary Cooper was also interested in paid fire divisions becoming like volunteer fire departments, or wait, the other way, volunteer fire departments becoming paid. And Vaughn Jones said that the DFPC doesn't have like a stance on that transition, but that if any volunteer fire departments are interested in making that shift, that they can reach out to DFPC and sort of be coached through that process and also receive more information on the pros and cons of making that change.
Great. Thank you for getting those answers. That's helpful. And I'll pass this on to our departments and volunteer and our emergency services. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on that? Great. Courtney, thanks for getting those questions answered. And so if that's all the questions we have, then we'll move on to our next agenda item. And I want to thank Dana for being here today. She's kind of our guest speaker today. I will, Angela or Courtney, would you like to introduce Dana and talk a little bit about her background, and then we'll just turn it over to her to present. Thank you for being here.
Sure thing. I'll let Dana introduce herself because I want to make sure I get her title right. I know there's been some transitions, but I'll just say personally, I've had a great time working with Dana. Really for the sort of the last 2 years. She's heading up the State Forest Service Urban and Community Forestry Program, and there's a bunch of great interfaces there with DNR in terms of thinking about natural and working lands and natural climate solutions, and as well as sort of urban green space equity. So I'll let Dana further introduce herself.
Thanks for that, Angela. Thanks, Courtney, and thanks to the committee for having me here this morning. I will admit that I've never been in front of this group before. I'm not entirely certain what your level of familiarity might be with urban and community forestry, if there are any very specific questions that you have. So I think I'll kind of toss that to you first, so I know whether to go with the really brief high level thing or dive a little more into some details. So if I can ask that question first, and then maybe a little expectation of how long would you like me to talk? Because I can talk for 5 minutes or an hour, and I imagine it's probably somewhere in between, closer to 5.
Yeah, it's probably about 15, which I would think, because we have a couple other agenda items. But if we go over 20 for questions, I think it'd be fine. We have a fairly brief meetings on Fridays, but we wanted to learn some from you and hear about this. And I'm trying to remember, it was one of our members who had some questions. Was it, I don't remember who brought this up, but it was a good suggestions. So anybody want to add what their questions were? But I'm really thrilled to have you here, because I think we wanted to talk maybe about not only the urban, but kind of that urban fringe too. So
Cool.
I don't know if it was Samantha or was it Julie, or maybe it was Hillary. Maybe it was Hillary. Hillary's not here today, so I'm trying to remember.
Courtney, if you have the question written down, feel free to read it off. But I think Dana, I think just providing a quick overview of urban and community forestry programs at the State Forest Service, 10 minutes-ish. And then people were specifically interested in your conversations with Rep. Froelich around her Million Trees bill and what that might look like, what the current status of it is. And just for your benefit too, this is the legislative committee of the Forest Health Council. And so really their role is to understand the legislative landscape when it comes to forest management at the state level, and then make recommendations. So I think this is a mix of like education and providing an update.
Perfect. That is incredibly helpful. So I will share some slides if that is okay. And you don't need to look at yourselves. Can everyone see those?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was like, I can't see you anymore. So I think what my goal is this morning, then, as you've said, is to provide an introduction and overview to the Urban and Community Forestry Program in Colorado, but to place it in context of what else is happening within the Colorado State Forest Service, within the Department of Natural Resources, within the much broader landscape of agencies and organizations active within the state and frankly across the country, advancing what I think are some pretty transformational investments in trees in cities and towns. So first, trees in cities and towns. That is what urban forests are. And the planting and long-term maintenance, removal and utilization of those trees at the end of their lifetimes, that is what urban forestry is. There are a tremendous number of benefits, ecological, social, physical, and mental health that have been well researched for a number of years, and a lot of places that folks can go to look into those benefits much more in depth. Our own website, and the Colorado Forest Action Plan are great resources. The Vibrant Cities Lab, Trees Are Good, which is a website maintained by the International Society of Arboriculture, and Healthy Trees, Healthy Lives, which is a campaign studying and communicating the human health benefits of urban trees and urban forests, started in the southeastern US and really now very active nationwide. In Colorado, community forests are all over the state. They are relevant at multiple scales and relevant both socially and ecologically. They're important in folks' backyards, in schoolyards, along river corridors, in urban, suburban, and exurban parks, and again, at multiple scales. So as we start to think about regional investments, regional data sources, regional analyses of how multiple agencies and multiple partners can invest together toward common goals, really want to make the argument that urban and community forests are a part of that scale of work as well. This slide is blank because urban and community forests are often left out of large-scale conversations about natural resource management, about forestry, about development. And I think there are a number of reasons that that is an oversight and frankly, dangerous. If we look at some of the data and maps that we have about historical wildfire occurrence within Colorado, risk for wildfires occurring within the wildland-urban interface, it looks a lot like that previous map of where our cities and towns are in the state, where some of our major transportation corridors are within the state that people are using constantly. And what happened last year, not too far from this time, with the Marshall Fire in Boulder County, really just was an excruciating reminder of how important these urban landscapes are in larger scale conversations about forest management, wildfire management across the state of Colorado. Population growth continues in our fair state of Colorado, and for so many people, the beauty of our natural environments, the beauty and the health of our urban environments is why people come here, why people stay here. If we don't consider urban and community forestry investments as the state continues to grow, we run the risk of not only losing existing urban tree canopy, but setting ourselves up for having a less resilient, less diverse, less healthy, less benefit providing urban tree canopy for even more people moving forward. So that's some of the argument for the state having an urban and community forestry program, an argument for integrating that program with other programs, and an argument for continuing to make investments, local investments, partner investments, state and federal investments. Where do those investments go? Right now, we have a robust and ready to grow urban and community forestry program within the Colorado State Forest Service that is committed to creating and maintaining healthy and resilient forests that are integrated with and contribute to the well-being of all Colorado communities. As an agency, as a program, we provide financial and technical assistance communities and to nonprofit organizations. We provide networking, outreach, and education to the public, to green industry, nonprofit, and other professional and normal folks, partners, right? You don't need a master's degree to engage in our programs. These financial and educational and technical assistance activities are carried out by myself, 2 other full-time program managers, one that is currently placed in Eastern Colorado, and one that as of next week, hopefully will be offered to be replaced in Grand Junction, Colorado. We also receive support for these program activities from 4 area supervisory foresters and from several field office-based foresters that really maintain our relationships with and our connections to local communities, to their politics, to their systems, to their trees. We deliver the urban and community forestry program in collaboration with and receiving significant funding from the U.S. Forest Service. We are an administrative agency of the Warner College of Natural Resources at CSU. We work very closely with a statewide nonprofit partner, the Colorado Tree Coalition, and engage in a number of, again, local, statewide, national, and international level partnerships, such as with the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education, Project Learning Tree run through the Sustainable Forest Initiative, the Arbor Day Foundation, and the International Society of Arboriculture. We currently distribute funding through the Colorado Tree Coalition. So we, since the creation of this program and this nonprofit organization in the early 1990s, have granted over $1 million that has been leveraged manyfold into communities. Those funds come to communities through the Colorado Tree Coalition, with their original source being state dollars, U.S. Forest Service dollars. Xcel Energy Foundation has been investing in community tree management and planting for years, and other entities like Colorado Public Radio have been making significant investments in tree planting and tree maintenance, both in community settings, so often in parks, at schools, in park systems along creek corridors, like in Wheat Ridge, and then also in more wildland urban interface areas and areas within and surrounding communities that have been affected by natural disasters, fire, floods, tornadoes, and the like. Okay, how big is this program right now, and where might we see it going? Conveniently, we just pulled together all of these data for a 5-year program review with the U.S. Forest Service. So this slide and the next couple are really a snapshot of what kind of service we're providing to communities in Colorado right now. We're serving close to 200 communities, nearly 4 million people. The majority of Colorado's population is living in communities that are developing or sustainably managing urban and community forestry programs. That means that they have some kind of professional and or volunteer management for their tree resource. They're making a budget investment in that tree resource. They have local policies and ordinances that are designed to protect that tree resource. What our funding has looked like, this is over basically a 5-year period. And if you were to backcast this quite a long ways, actually, it would look pretty consistent with somewhere in the neighborhood of a $200,000 to a $400,000 federal grant to the state to run the program. What we see in the orange are some recent competitive investments from the U.S. Forest Service in urban and community forestry in Colorado. We are seeing growth, a little bit of growth over the last few years in this base program allocation from the U.S. Forest Service, and we're anticipating another $50,000 per year bump in that base program from the U.S. Forest Service, given recent investments through the Inflation Reduction Act. The orange bar on the top is really where we are expecting and hoping to see even more significant federal investments in urban and community forestry because of the Inflation Reduction Act. What this looks like in terms of where we allocate these funds now and hopefully moving forward is a majority into our internal capacity. Those staff positions that I mentioned at the field level, area office level, state office, and then into our leadership structure. Over the past couple of years, we've really been focused on increasing our investment in the Colorado Tree Coalition and creating new subaward agreements with other local and regional scaled partners, including the Park People and Nature-Based Climate Solutions, so that we can invest in partner capacity to complement our agency capacity, as well as get dollars directly into communities to be planting trees, maintaining trees, learning about and planning about their urban forests, and communicating with the public and others about the benefits and the costs of managing that urban forest. Moving forward, right? This is a big deal. It's really exciting that all of you are wanting to have this conversation, that Colorado has a state forester incredibly interested in and willing to have this conversation. And we'll see where it goes, right? But what's even more exciting than these ideas in general form is the amount of attention that dozens of partners have already spent in envisioning what does a much bigger investment in urban and community forestry look like in the Front Range? What does it look like in Colorado? What might it look like to imagine two big hubs of urban forestry and community engagement in Denver and Grand Junction, Colorado? We have dozens of partners who have come together over the past 2 years to envision, to articulate, and to present to multiple partners a really clear articulation of what we need to be investing in, how, why, and exactly what it might cost to plant the trees that we need to provide the benefits that we're promising, to maintain them over time, and to build the diverse, effective, supported workforce across public, private, and nonprofit sectors that we need to do all of this work. One of the most important parts of the Inflation Reduction Act funding that is coming down, and the federal urban and community forestry program in general, these are both really being considered Justice 40 programs and investments. And there is a required, a very necessary, and a long overdue investment in underserved communities, in vulnerable populations, and really investing in equity-centered community greening. We have some amazing partners within Colorado that are doing this already, that have been doing this for a long time, and are meaningfully engaged in the conversations about how to really kick this up a notch. Okay, so we're here with the legislative committee, and we know that last year there was introduced and considered, and this year there's being considered again some kind of bill connected to or independently supporting recent investments in the state's nursery capacity. For lots of reasons, I think this is a really great idea. And I recently had the opportunity to sit down with a colleague from the state of Washington that has a really great model for legislation that looks at not only planting trees, planting 1 million trees, planting 100,000 trees, whatever we decide is, is that right number and how to communicate that best. What is really cool about the Evergreen Communities Act that the state of Washington put together is that it is comprehensive, understands the value of planting and establishing trees in communities, cities and towns, but also their long-term maintenance and the capacity that is required, again, at that state, local, and partner level to do the work of caring for the trees that we're putting in the ground. Another thing that this Evergreen Communities Act includes is an explicit focus, before Justice 40 was ever passed, on environmental justice and investing at least half of all program dollars, benefits, et cetera, in highly impacted communities. And much like we have a tool developing and starting to be used in Colorado that looks at environmental justice and the disproportionate impact of various air pollution, water pollution, other sources of harm. Washington has a similar tool. California has a similar tool that they use by legislative mandate to invest urban and community forestry dollars and to direct urban and community forestry resources into communities. So that is what I wanted to share. Hopefully that was about solid on time. I did share in advance of this meeting a written program summary. I'm happy to provide these slides, happy to follow up at another meeting or in writing or whatever with any additional ideas that this might spark, questions that this might spark, etc. So thanks again for inviting me to speak in front of this group.
Thank you, Dana. That was such a great and excellent presentation. You actually answered 2 of my questions already with that, so it was amazing. Director McCombs, do you have anything to add or I'm sorry I didn't have you speak from before she started too. Anything else you'd like to add? This has been a really great presentation.
No, thank you, Commissioner. Dana really needs no introduction, right? She, just for folks' awareness, that Dana brings an enormous amount of capacity to this work, having served in the regional director role at the U.S. Forest Service on urban and community forestry prior, as well as in the NGO sector around it in this space. And so we're extremely lucky to have somebody with as many relationships, connections, and experience with the programming. So Colorado is going to lead out. We just by the fortune of having such great people leading the charge, we're going to do some really amazing things around the urban and community space with these huge federal investments that we're already targeting. So a great place for this group to lean in and think about, especially with the interest from legislators, on how we marry up our unique capacity, our well-positioned sort of geography, communities, and politics to make some really big inroads on some of these unique places where we can really affect lives and we can really affect communities and affect programs. It's one of my favorite programs in the state and private world. So I hope that you were inspired and that we take some hard looks on how we can keep this as a potential focus area for not just this subcommittee, but for the larger council as well.
Thank you, Director McCombs. Commissioner Tisdale, before I let you ask your question, I want to ask the question we had from our previous meeting and kind of what sparked our interest in having Dana come present. The question was the water impact that urban and community forestry has on municipal water need, because we do have kind of this, looming challenge, or actually not looming, current challenge of water and water, resources. So what does that look like? How do we manage that to be able to manage the canopies, especially those first few years? I'm sure with the initial plantings, it takes a lot more water. So I think that was what sparked this conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and maybe one that I should be anticipating more often than not these days. So I'm not going to be able to give specific facts and figures, but we do have the benefit of researchers here in Colorado active at CU Denver and within the CSU system who are doing exactly that kind of water budget research, who are looking into what are the best and the widest variety of particularly deciduous shade trees that we can be planting within Colorado that are environmentally adapted, drought tolerant, and anticipated to be able to survive and thrive within the climate conditions that we expect over the next 20 to 50 years that they'll be growing and maturing into. From a water perspective, what I can say is that, yes, trees in Colorado need to be irrigated. They need to be provided supplemental water as they are establishing over the first few years of their life, and in particularly dry periods, especially in the winter. Even mature trees do need to have supplemental water applied to them. What is not true is that, or I don't know how to phrase that, trees do not have a higher water budget than, say, irrigated turf landscapes. When we are planting thoughtfully designed, environmentally and climate adapted landscapes that include herbaceous plants, shrubs, and trees instead of turf dominated landscapes, we're going to use less water. We're going to use less energy in the form of cooling in the summer than we would otherwise, or with a whole scale, tearing out of turf and replacing it with rocks, right? We're going to be in the sweet spot of lower cost, greater benefits if we're having thoughtfully environmentally and climate adapted landscapes planted that do include shade trees.
Excellent. Commissioner, I appreciate that. So next up is Commissioner Tisdale and then Mr. Morgan.
Thanks, Jody. Dana, yeah, I was wondering about that water question as I was looking at that map of the urban forestry boundary that was on one of your last slides, or one of the focus areas. But as I started to think about that, I also thought that maybe there's something to either know or research regarding urban forest interaction with ozone pollution. And I did a quick search and it looks like it's undetermined, like what the interaction is between urban forestry and either ozone amplification or depletion. And it certainly works on it. Obviously urban forests are good for other things, but I think this would be of particular interest to the Front Range counties if there's anything to be known.
Excellent question. And again, not something that I have like, oh, you ought to read this particular paper queued up in my brain, but I should be able to turn around and get that to you.
Great. Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, the water question was real big on my mind as we kind of transfer from use for agricultural water to this urban forestry water or urban development water. But a couple comments I've noticed very much lately that in the biomass industry here in Colorado, we kind of have a biomass industry where we take products that we've thinned or removed for fuels purposes in the mountains. And we now have a very stiff competition for markets for that, for what is essentially a new crop of urban products. They didn't set out to create a product. They weren't growing it per se, but the amount of wood that shows up in landfills or dump sites or grass clippings, this is a biomass and it does run in direct competition to the biomass that we are being asked to harvest to reduce fuel situations in the mountains. So I understand there's a great public appetite for urban shade trees and urban forests, and we are shifting as a community. But I think we have to I think there will be a lot of unintended consequences I'm not promoting negative or positive, but we sure have to deal with them in advance and going forward. And the one that we've noticed a lot is the competition for marketing. We've been pressured a lot to develop better biomass markets in the state. And when you have urban forestry, which is essentially an irrigated product, and the primary use of biomass products are in urban areas, so you have an instant huge freight advantage right there. And I maintain that it will and is impacting some of your other efforts in the state for fuels reduction work. I think that's already occurring. And I think the other thing is that we have to be real careful, because products that are produced as biomass in a forestry situation have a network where they're already pretty heavily utilized. You would like to have better, we would like to have better, but they are pretty well utilized. But a great deal of the products that are generated through urban forest growth still tend to end up in undesired uses or landfills or whatever. If you're going to do this and you're going to have that much of the product, you need to make sure you intercept it before it ends up, or you're going to have real issues in your landfills, and you kind of do already. That's just some thoughts I had. And the water, my first one, and everybody else has already addressed it, is that you're making a conscious choice from, we do a lot of work in clearing for the irrigation companies, and the change in the last 5 or 10 years from rural agricultural ownership to community and county and state ownership in these has been huge. We have new bosses there, and we have a different set of parameters that we work for. So just some thoughts on that. Thank you.
Should I respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah, super, super glad that you brought all of that up, and that notion of full cycle or full life cycle management of the urban forest. We do have a significant landfill problem. We do not currently have enough markets, enough producers, enough people willing to remove trees in urban settings in ways that they can be utilized to produce high quality chips or produce dimensional lumber, produce slabs that are useful in architectural applications. So I would hope to, engage you and others in the forest products industry in conversations about how urban forestry can be a part of and can complement the hopefully growing forest products and wood utilization industry in Colorado, because we have seen such a decline over the last few decades, and a need to invest in existing and create new businesses and new products at multiple scales, so that they're not competing with each other. I don't ever want to see that being the case, and that's certainly no one's intention in the urban space. So I would really, really love to be a part of conversations that you're in, and invite you to be in conversations that I'm in, such as with Molly Pitts. I've had conversations with her, Tim Reeder, our wood utilization and marketing program lead, trying to figure out how some urban wood network stuff that we're trying to get started in Colorado is intimately plugged into and supporting that bigger picture forest products industry. I'll share a couple links that I think are relevant to that, so that you're aware of some of the conversations that are already going on. And I met at our national meeting one of our newer state Forest Service hires who's working with Tim Reeder and Kurt Mackes, Maria Gaetano, on a statewide biomass study. So really interested in continuing that conversation with her, learning more about that work and how the urban space shows up or doesn't or can in that assessment. So thank you.
Great. I really appreciate that. I think that's all we have time for, unless there's other burning questions. And I didn't know if Dana was going to help give us an update on the Million Trees Initiative that might be possible legislation with Meg Froelich, or who was going to kind of bring the update on that. Just because I'm looking at our time, and Dana, unless there's another burning question for Dana, just looking at our time. And then I thought maybe Dana had some information or some comments on that initiative too.
I think that would make sense. Dana's the expert and has been interacting directly with Froelich staff, obviously with engagement support from others. But I think it could give you guys kind of an update on what's formulating.
Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of details. We have had a couple of conversations to the tune of, I know that she wants to introduce something again. I have not seen any kind of new draft since what was put together last year. So really kind of took the opportunity in preparing for today to put together some of my own thinking that I can, with Matt and the rest of yours blessing, continue to have that conversation with Representative Froelich to develop something that is in line with what this committee is interested in and what the state is ready to put forward. But I don't have any further details on what that proposal might be looking like.
I would add real quick that, Dana just returned from the National Urban Community Forestry meeting, where all of the different players in the state and private space got together in Seattle, as well as with the leaders from across the country. And so some of the things that we're bringing home from that engagement is some of these working models, like what we saw in Washington and other states. We don't, Colorado will obviously do Colorado's version of anything that we move forward with, but we can absolutely learn from our colleagues and learn from working models that are having success and that align with our values and the goals and objectives that both the governor and the legislature have for this kind of work. So we'll continue to do that. And again, it's another great example of Dana as a resource because of the relationships and the networks that she operates in across the country, and certainly here in the interior and Pacific West.
Great. I have a quick additional question, unless anyone else has a question about that. I'm looking for hands. I'm trying to go back to my written question. The quick question I have, because we in Lerner, we've been doing actually trying to plan and look at some of these. We have a community dashboard that we're building, looking at public health data and looking at the number of very extreme hot days. And then also overlapping that with the number of folks coming into emergency rooms with heat-related illnesses on those days, looking at the ozone, just kind of that interaction. And I saw some articles when you brought up the equity, I think it was the green equity or the greening of communities. And I know that some of these highly impacted neighborhoods have fewer trees, making them hotter. And then a lot of those folks also probably don't have the same cooling mechanisms in their homes. And some of these may be on the urban fringe that are unincorporated Lerner County, because we're kind of growing past those city boundaries, but we're also worried about where we can plan for maybe urban cooling centers, or how that impacts public health. And I didn't know if there's an intersection with those conversations with this initiative and public health, and kind of how that looks.
Yes, another, really hot topic, pun intended, right? To bring up a huge driver in how these Inflation Reduction Act dollars are going to be invested and why they've come to fruition right now is exactly because of that urban heat. And like we have researchers that have been looking into, are looking into, and are publishing on the water budget issue, they're very much looking at urban heat and our ability to have the quality and the scale and the scope of data that we need to be able to look at those conditions from, big picture scale. Where should we be focusing in the state? And that really tight neighborhood scale. Where is it hottest in this community? Where are people at risk of, frankly, dying because it's so hot? We need to have those tools and those data to make those really, really targeted investments. So in follow-up to this meeting, I can find some of those specific resources, some of the existing mapping tools that we have, and others that we're thinking about creating in Colorado and then at the national scale to be able to direct those tree planting and tree maintenance efforts to exactly where they need to be.
Great, that's amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Christy has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you, Dana. This is good information. I'm a rancher from Steamboat, and you mentioned a term in your original presentation a few minutes ago, and I was just hoping you could explain what it means to me. Environmental justice. What does that mean?
Yes. I'm sure there are a lot of, different interpretations of that, but basically what that means is in order to provide environmental justice, we direct resources, tools, data, funding, programming to places that are disproportionately impacted by pollution and by historic underinvestment in the quality of their environment. So the topic of tree equity came up. We know that through, say, redlining in US cities, that there have not been the same level of investments in urban infrastructure and in trees in majority minority neighborhoods than there have been in majority white and wealthier neighborhoods. So environmental justice is a focus on kind of reversing some of those inequities through targeted investment. That's how I would characterize it.
Okay, thank you. And so then I have a comment for the group, just that, what I'm processing here in my 2 cents. You guys, this feels like a deviation from forest health to me personally. And I want to keep our focus, me personally, I think we should keep our focus on the health of Colorado forests. That feels like when we start talking about, providing shade for people in communities that don't have a lot of trees, for me personally, that just feels like a deviation from our mission. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Christy. And Dana, thanks for answering all of our questions. We're almost out of time today, but I just want to thank you for presenting and answering the water question for us. That was our big driving question, to have you come speak and find out some more information about that. So I think it sparked some really great conversation, and want to thank you for your time today and really appreciate your willingness to come, especially with a little bit of notice. So thank you very much. So
No problem. Thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments or questions? I'm assuming we would be willing to meet in 2 weeks on a Friday again, just to kind of follow up if there's any questions, or is everyone up for that? I thought we could kind of have a countdown to the session, and I did get contacted last night from some Linnu legislators and other legislators actually asking about the wildfire interim bills, and I got a lot of really great comments about the bill that's coming forward, and they're really excited about it. They wanted to know more about the Forest Health Council, and so I thought that was interesting. They know me personally, they just reached out. There were some questions, so it sounds like the buzz is some good feedback on some of those bills coming out of that committee. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I didn't know if anyone else had heard any other buzz about that.
I would just say that I continue to engage, in formal and informal settings with legislative members, as well as just people kind of operating in our arena. And there's just a lot of excitement about the continued focus as it relates to forest health, watershed health, wildfire mitigation, and climate resiliency as it relates to how we steward in partnership with our federal friends, but also taking leadership as a state. So I think it's going to be potentially another really exciting year as it relates to legislative focus on the issues that are important to everybody on this council. So I look forward to your continued engagement and dialogue. And I really appreciate Christy's perspective, and keep having really transparent and open dialogue about where it is that we want to put our energy and focus. And that's what's going to allow us to continue to be a valuable contributor to policymaking in this arena. So I'm super excited about the session, and I really appreciate everyone's perspective and voices. And I think we're just getting started in this group. So
I agree.
Times ahead.
I appreciate all of our diverse perspectives and conversation. It's a great, safe place to have these conversations because they're really needed. So thank you. for saying that, Director McCombs. I have a favor to ask. I think it was our last meeting. I've been trying to rack my brain over the last few weeks. Remember where I heard this, but someone had mentioned about an Evans company or some of the timber big buildings have been in Denver, and there's a new company that had been doing was that you, Director McCombs? And could you tell me what the name of that company? The reason I'm asking is CSU is looking to increase their starting their Powerhouse 2 second building, and it looks like they're going to do a major timber kind of construction, and they're looking to really reduce the amount of environmental carbon impact they have on the community. And so I had mentioned that, they're looking to do that, but they're looking out of products from Montana. And I had mentioned that, hey, I think this is happening in Colorado, but I couldn't remember the name. So
Yeah, so Golden West Mill, I think is what Andy's shop's called out there. And I'll get that information to you. He does a technology called Edge, Glue, and Rip, and it's in the early stages, but as soon as his press arrives, he's going to be in a scalable situation, and we'd love to help you connect anybody with his operation, as well as with Timber Age down in Durango, a couple other outfits in Colorado. They're starting to scale up and maybe able to meet some of that demand. Potentially, maybe not at that external, but maybe some of those internal fabrication that would go on with building construction. So yeah, absolutely. And I'll get that to you offline, Commissioner.
that'd be great. I appreciate it. I hate to ask that question, but I know we had talked about it in our last meeting, or it took me a while to remember where I heard it. So, and finally this morning I woke up and I said, oh, I remember who said that. So
Sure.
Commissioner Tisdale.
Yeah, just on that, quickly on that point, there's one of the people that I was spent June, I was at the Harvard program, Chief of Forestry Assistance Bureau at Idaho Department of Labor, I think, or Idaho Forestry Department of Lands. He showed me University of Idaho, one of their campuses just did an amazing all timber, I think it's a stadium, in fact. So it's, I can't remember exactly, but I can get you in touch with Archie Gray also. So.
Yeah, thanks. And I know Archie well. I just saw him last couple weeks ago in Santa Fe. So yeah, there's some great models out there, and between Ben and I, we'll get you some. And feel free to get those folks in contact with me, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, and I'll get them looped in with Tim Reeder from our Biomass and Wood Utilization Program, who has all of this covered and knows everybody everywhere as it relates to this this space. You're muted, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's Friday. I'm ready for no more Zoom meetings. I have 2 more today. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that information. Is there any burning topics or conversations you'd like to have next time? Otherwise, that we could just kind of talk about any changes with legislation coming up for the session, and kind of that landscape going forward, just to kind of prepare for the session, because that will be, we'll have 2 weeks, and we'll probably have I don't know how you look at the holidays, but then we'll have that session get off and running. So it'd be nice to just kind of look at that landscape. And that's my suggestion. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
Good idea. Good to see you all.
Yeah, great to see you all. So 2 weeks, is that okay? And we'll talk then.
Works.
Great.
Sounds good.
And Courtney, I'll be calling you here soon. We're gonna have some talks. So it's about.
Okay. Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You guys, great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.